time in months, and what a glorious thing it is.
Yeah. And which movie was it? Please remind our audience.
So I went to, because we are not allowed to go to the actual cinema in Melbourne yet. That's
Yep.
But we were just saying cinemas are on the same schedule to reopen as brothels. I think for obvious reasons. It just makes perfect sense.
But there are only so many places that you can get a hand job in the middle of this.
Exactly right. I mean, Pee Wee Herman recommends Melbourne cinemas. The drive-ins are allowed to open, and open-air cinemas, though. If you look outside today, it is not open-air cinema kind of weather. But the drive-ins are open, so I went to the Coburg drive-in here in Melbourne to see The Matrix. A film we reviewed a couple of months ago.
Yep.
And that's the first time I've seen it on the big screen since 1999 or something.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely chock-a-block because we haven't been able to go to the cinema in months of any kind. Yeah. And it was a warm night, and they had Starship Troopers on the other screen. I think it's all right. I think somebody's watching our podcast or listening to our podcast and going, these guys have their finger on the pulse. Let's play obscure 90s sci-fi films.
You're welcome, outdoor cinema world.
Tonight, actually, I would have liked to have gone, but it's a bit late because I have to work. But tonight is there a 1989 Batman playing, and I would have liked to have gone to that, but it was good to be back. It was good to be back at the cinema, and I can see myself doing that a fair few more times over the coming weeks, I would imagine, or however long it takes for us to be able to go back to a real cinema again.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, we have had the restrictions lifted to a certain degree, and Melbourne, of course, showed their stupidity. So, first sunny weekend or a public holiday, flock everywhere and fuck the rules, but never mind.
Yeah, I mean, they did it in the UK this summer, and it's been fine in the UK. Everything's going well. I mean, I saw
all of the major Western countries that are primarily English speaking are really doing great things right now.
Actually, come on now. That is disrespectful to New Zealand. They are doing very nicely.
New Zealand's not exactly what I would refer to as one of the top powers of the world.
I was going to say, if what you were going to say, New Zealand's not what you would refer to as a country, and in which case I would tend to agree with you. It's just a state. They are a state of Australia. They just don't know it yet.
They're just the granny flat of Australia.
Very true. It's a granny flat. Yeah, it's them out the back. Who are doing much better than us right now. And I have a friend who's on over there. She's actually a Kiwi. And she moved back there probably a month, 6 weeks ago. Because why the fuck wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And she saw these pictures of where she's in Gisborne and Dunedin and stuff in the south, and you're like, no. They're allowed to have art shows and cinemas and wineries and lions and tigers and bears. And I'm like, it was just,
they're allowed to leave their states.
We'll be able to go to New South Wales by the end of the month. I did tell her, actually, I said, your Instagram right now is the biggest advertisement for New Zealand since Lord of the Rings. Because it's a glorious thing watching her Instagram. You're like, oh. So kudos, New Zealand, you're doing very well. And frankly, let's face it, I'd like to put a hat off to the rest of the country has done very nicely. It's really been us here in Melbourne who let down the side.
Yeah, we've been pretty stupid.
But hopefully all the dickheads at the beach the other day didn't go spreading the virus too badly, though. I mean,
let's hope.
Let's hope's all we got. But we're not here to discuss current affairs and the state of the coronavirus. We're going to avoid the miserable news that's going on around the world today and talk about old movies from the 80s.
Yes, because what is more important than staying on topic, pinpoint the laser fine edge of society and pop culture? Yes, we are going to be talking about Big Trouble in Little China.
Again, this is not the first time we've reviewed it on the show, but it is a good movie, so why not talk about it a little bit?
Yeah. And we don't necessarily need to talk about it for a very long time for any listeners, but it is the next chain in our chain session following last week's The Thing, one of the most iconic connections of John Carpenter and Kurt Russell together, one of the defining horror movies or thriller, psychological isolationism movies of all time. We are following this up with the action comedy, martial arts, science fantasy, bizarro medley of Frankenstein monster mess that is Big Trouble in Little China.
Frankly, you know the world's in a good place when you're looking back at the crew in the setting of The Thing and go, 9 months a year in blackout conditions of Antarctica. That sounds fairly attractive right now. Preferably without the alien monster, but yep. I'm flexible.
Yep. I think that's
fair. So, Big Trouble in Little China. You sort of nailed it here. It says action adventure comedy on IMDb.
Yeah.
A rough and tumble trucker helps rescue his friend's fiance from an ancient sorcerer in a supernatural battle beneath Chinatown. This is John Carpenter. John Carpenter is absolutely best. So I think we talk about it whenever we go through and sort of talk about the stuff that he was doing at the time. I mean, he had one of the most remarkable runs of form in the 80s, starting with Dark Star, which is an underrated film. I think it's his first film.
Great film.
And he moves on to Assault on Precinct 13, which is a masterpiece. Halloween, iconic masterpiece. Skip all the TV movies. The Fog, underrated horror masterpiece. Escape from New York, masterpiece. The Thing, masterpiece. Christine, pretty fucking good. Starman, maybe not quite to the standard of the others, but still pretty good. Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Then we got Prince of Darkness, which I have not seen, but into They Live as kind of sort of tying the bow on, and then onto some other stuff after that, which is less well known.
Yeah.
But that's going from 74 through 88 without a miss.
Yeah.
I mean, and these aren't like to use a cricket terminology, these aren't ones and twos. These are boundaries he's hitting, right? Like these are, and they may not have been massive hits at the time. I think but they are all iconic in their own way, in the sense that we've had Halloween's been remade fuck knows how many times.
Yep.
We've had a remake of A Fog, I think, from memory. We've had a remake of The Thing.
Yeah,
we've had a remake of Assault on Precinct 13, and there is a pending remake, apparently, of Escape from New York, has been talked about forever.
Well, not only that, but apparently Dwayne Johnson, Big Trouble in Little China. There's rumors of a remake of They Live. They're kind of revisiting some of the ultimate classics, and so far the only one of John Carpenter's remakes that's come out is The Thing, which is technically a prequel, but it was entirely unnecessary. So it doesn't bode well for the rest of them.
I thought the old Assault on Precinct 13 remake was okay. It had Ethan Hawke in it, and it wasn't terrible. Like it was passable. But I just like when you talk about directors who are on a run, that is a run and a half of amazing work. And what I was thinking about while I was watching this today, and this just might be something we've talked about in the past, is how ahead of his time he was in doing his film.
Oh, yeah.
In the sense that it's the mid-'80s, and this film feels very heavily influenced by Asian cinema.
Yep.
I'm guessing. I don't know, but I'm guessing he was watching a lot of that Hong Kong cinema that later people like Quentin Tarantino based his whole thing around, Hong Kong cinema. We owe Quentin Tarantino's love of Hong Kong cinema is legendary. It became very fashionable in the mid 90s to early 2000s. John Woo was making movies in Hollywood. We had just to go back to The Matrix. So I imagine a lot of the stunts in this film are wire work, or some of them anyway.
It is, yeah. This was there's a really interesting interview with Kurt Russell and John Carpenter, and they're talking about it, and they say that rightly or wrongly, but they are talking along the lines of, if it wasn't for movies like Big Trouble in Little China and the Asian action movies that kind of inspired that, the use of wire work, especially the evolution of it in The Matrix, just wouldn't really have happened.
I have to agree. And,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, I'm not going to put my hand up and say I'm an expert in Asian cinema or an expert in filming stunts or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I struggle. I wouldn't think to be terribly, and if you're at home and you're listening and I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong. But I can't think of too many Western films, major Western action films, that were doing wire work stunts as extensively as this film was in the mid 80s. So, I mean, I was just sitting there watching them, especially the final fight scene with a lot of those stunts and that stunt work. And after having seen The Matrix the night before, I'm like, this is one that you probably, maybe Wachowski, I don't know if Wachowski sat down and watched this or fans of this movie, but, this is an important part of that evolution that became such a part of action films. And here it was 10, 12 years before it became, before Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and The Matrix made it, the action film way of doing films du jour. And he was there doing it. He was,
Yeah, absolutely agree. And we're just talking about the film kind of rather nebulously. We've spouted about John Carpenter, and it's very fair to say that we are absolute fans of all of his work. But we haven't even touched on some of the people acting in this. Obviously, Kurt Russell he's one of those guys. This is one of those roles where you can just see him having so much fun. I alluded to it last week. His character of Jack Burton is kind of inconsequential to the whole movie. He's just accidentally dragged along in this thing that he regularly does not understand. And there's, one of the best bits of it, he goes into the thing, shoots up into the air, and gets knocked out for a few minutes. It's like, oh yeah, we don't need our star. Let's just let the action do the talking.
And one thing you'll notice, I think I notice more every time I see this, is that Kurt Russell's performance in this film is basically just an impersonation of John Wayne.
Yeah.
The whole thing is just him doing John Wayne. You just tell what Jack Burton says, it's and I think we talked about this last time, but it's certainly, considering some of the other podcasting projects I work on, from a diversity perspective, and it's actually here, John Carpenter envisages the film as an inverse of traditional scenarios in action films with a Caucasian protagonist helped by a minority sidekick. Jack Burton, despite his bravado, was constantly portrayed as rather bumbling. So basically, he is essentially the sidekick in this film, despite the fact that he's front and center on the poster. Wang Chi, played by Dennis Dunn, is actually the hero of this film.
100%, because it's his journey. It's all about his fiance who gets kidnapped, his kind of his development throughout the whole thing, because Jack Burton doesn't really develop much beyond a man-child.
I mean, and he's got no idea what's going on. His only interest is to get his truck back, and as he sort of put it so succinctly, he's really dragged through this kind of thing. It's like, I don't really want to be in this kind of thing. It's just sort of, he's just there. And because of that, there's some fantastic South Park episodes about that sort of thing where the kids are trying to get their game machine back. They can't, they're sort of being dragged into this global sort of, spy thriller. And they're like, don't care, we just want our machine back. And, they just sort of reminded me of this one when I was watching it. But in the mid 80s, again, having, Jesus Christ, today, there wouldn't be terribly many Asian actors who would headline major Hollywood action film. Jackie Chan.
Yep.
And I don't think Chow Yun-fat or anyone like that would do it anymore. He's probably a little bit past it. But he did at one point in time, I guess, or Jet Li.
Yep.
But apart from those sort of guys, in the 80s, having a guy like that, your hero is basically, an Asian American, is certainly unusual and really subversive and really clever of John Carpenter and the writers.
Absolutely. And, it's a comedy. It is 100% played for laughs, but you can't help but fall in love with the just the way that the Asian community and this is it's such a wonderful rare occurrence for the film to actually be set in and filmed in San Francisco, to have so much of that character be the real star of the show. I mean, the opening sequence where you're seeing the docks where Jack Burton comes into, it's alive. It feels lived in. It feels genuine. And then as the story quickly progresses, you get introduced to this absurd fantasy side. But when you look into it, it's like, okay, this is kind of, they've twisted certain kind of legends and myths and things like that from Asian culture, but it kind of fits in a weird jigsawy way, and none of it is actually disrespectful. Well, so I hope it's not disrespectful to anyone who actually watches it, who genuinely understands Asian culture far more than I do.
I think it's because it's got that. I mean, Asian culture isn't above poking fun at itself.
True.
True. I mean, what was it? Trying to think of it. Was it Kung Fu Hustle? I don't know. That was actually a production,
so good.
or an American production, set in Asia. But there are actual comedic kung fu movies. They're not averse to having a laugh.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, obviously, we probably are not the people who can make that judgment call, not being aficionados of Asian cinema, nor being Asian ourselves. But you're right. It does come across as authentic, and I feel like that's because it's done with love.
Yeah,
I feel like John Carpenter was probably a huge fan of Asian cinema, and I think because so much of the actual cast is Asian.
Yeah,
like if they cast white guys, as in the kung fu scenes, that would have not been okay. I mean, the fact that they went out and they got James Hong.
Oh my god, I love James Hong.
James Hong is a legend.
Yeah, he is fantastic, and Victor Wong as well as Egg Shen. They're two fantastic guys who just always bring it, and they have that wonderful ability of both of them have moments where they're really sincere and earnest, and they have this gravitas to them. But then at the same time, they have this stupidity. Like Egg Shen is consistently, like when he's driving around being the tour guide, he's an oaf. But as you learn more about kind of his kind of standing and position in society in San Francisco, in the Asian community, it's like, oh shit, there is tons of depth to this guy. And David Lopan is terrifying throughout the whole thing. First introduction, he's just standing there and he's like, come on, run me down. It's like, okay, that's weird. And even when he's bedridden and old, which incidentally, the effects on that are fantastic. I love them. He still feels like this weird, evil, genuinely terrifying, debilitated Mr. Burns. Crossed with like a Howard Hughes kind of weirdo, but it's never played off as just absurd. And Dennis Dunn as Wang Chi, he's beautiful. The kind of where he is talking so from the heart about the legends and how he even plays it, where he's just being really honest about how it was the difference from being a child to being an adult, and then seeing, oh, it's actually real. And the way that he played it against Kurt Russell, it was beautiful, really beautifully done.
And it's surprising he didn't go on to have much of a career after this, really, because he was wonderful in this.
Yeah.
Very interesting to read that originally John Carpenter wanted to cast Jackie Chan in that role. Which would have been pretty cool. I've got to be honest, as good as Dennis Dunn was, that would have been fucking cool.
What would have been interesting, I mean, this was at a point when I think maybe the only real Western movie that Jackie Chan had done was Cannonball Run, possibly.
Well, that's the thing, is apparently just to go with the IMDb trivia, the word in the street is here that producers were concerned that his English wasn't good enough. But originally they saw him do something and they said, oh, maybe he can, but he turned the role down.
Yeah. So I'm just curious about, Jackie Chan has made so much of his career about being lovable and comical, whereas the character of Wang Chi, he does have funny moments and he definitely needs the martial arts skills, but he's definitely more of a serious role than what you generally kind of instantly associate with Jackie Chan.
I'm honestly not familiar with Jackie's films from Hong Kong, from his Asian cinema. So I don't know if if it's just the way that Hollywood cast him when he got
Maybe.
to the United States, or because once you sort of get typecast, right? I think it's a bit like I don't think for years I don't think Schwarzenegger wanted to be a bad guy until Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe Jackie thought it'd be bad for his career to do bad guys roles in America.
Yeah, maybe.
But all the same, so really, James Hong, I just
Mm-hmm.
love him. Like he pops up in the weirdest places. He was in episodes of Seinfeld. He was in Doogie Howser. He was in Wayne's World 2, Kung Fu Panda. He's man is a machine. He's 91.
Yeah.
So
yeah. He's
treasure.
just always, even in just little bit roles, voice parts, he brings it every single time. He is great as the weird guy who deals in eyes in the original Blade Runner. And it's just all over the place. He is a living legend, and it's phenomenal.
He has 440 credits on IMDb. So, and I'm still getting credits here going back to the late 50s. So mid 50s.
A career going 70 years?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
His most recent credit, well, he has credits for this year and stuff coming up for next year. Seem to be voice acting mainly, but what a treasure. And interesting to read here is I was thinking the same thing while I was watching it. Like the guys in the big hats, the seasons, the spirits, the
Storms.
The Storms. I'm like, geez, they are very Mortal Kombat. And so it was interesting to read that they were an inspiration for some of the Mortal Kombat characters, as was James Hong's Lo Pan.
I can believe that. Isn't
it interesting how these ideas sort of cross-pollinate? So, like Carpenter is, John Carpenter is inspired by these Hong Kong films, creates his characters, go on to create iconic video game characters who become movies in of themselves, and hugely influential in video games and film moving forward. It's a wonderful thing, and it's so weird how it sort of flows through like that.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned Kim Cattrall in this as the white female love interest, I guess, because she's not Wang Chi's girlfriend, but she is the other girl with green eyes, and she gets pulled into this, and she is absolutely charming in this. She is not a damsel looking to be rescued. She wants to fight for her own things. She, in many ways, she's got, I kind of similed her character, Gracie Law, to kind of Lois Lane in with sort of like her curiosity and her determination to stand on her own 2 feet and just not let anything hold her back kind of gets her into a lot of trouble. But she never kind of expects anyone, because she is very aware that the one guy that is showing her a lot of childlike obsession is an idiot. So it's like, no, I'm not waiting for you to save me. I've got to do what I need to do to get out of this. And she's really wonderful. And even at the end, she falls in love with his affable, lovable personality, but it doesn't ruin her or anything like that. And they don't go off into the sunset together. It's actually kind of a realistic relationship that they go on.
I also to call out some of the female stars, and it's Kate Burton as Margot.
Yeah,
is fun. And this is in case you're ever wondering if this is really a comedy or not, there's a great scene where she just goes into exceeding detail explaining who David Lo Pan is, and you mean David Lo Pan, the reclusive millionaire businessman who hasn't been seen in years and doesn't come out except for once a year and hasn't been seen in public, and it's like something the Simpsons would have written. You're like, no, that's deliberately hilarious.
Yeah.
As none of this is by accident.
Absolutely. And we talked about it with The Thing, about the kind of reality and believability of all of the people in working at the space station, the ice station, and how they all had these kind of pre-existing levels of believability and history to them. I feel that it's a very similar comment that you can put against all of these guys as well. I mean, I've mentioned about the depth, the unveiling depth of Egg Shen's character, but also even people like Eddie Lee, who he's like a throwaway guy, but every time he's fully formed. He is a person, and there's sequences where the Chang Sings, I think it's the Chang Sings, the good guys, they come into Egg Shen's place and they're just kind of like eating, and there's this kind of like militia style camaraderie between them all. It just all is believable. It's great.
For sure. Just trying to remember some of his lines, but he just has this way about him. It's really easy.
Yeah.
And you sort of feel like you know his characters, even though you've just met them.
Yeah. It was my kind of his real introduction, where he walks in and Jack Burton's on the phone and he walks in singing a song to himself, and then he just starts kind of chiming in straight away. And I think the fact that it's like, oh, I know who you are. Wang Chi has talked about you, and the guy whose truck got stolen. It just helps build out this world of everyone talks about everyone, and everyone knows what's going on underneath. But everyone who isn't part of that community doesn't get it, or doesn't see it, or isn't welcome because they don't get it. They won't see it. They won't survive it. It's just great how it all kind of flows. It's really, really wonderful. I love it.
It does show its age in a couple of points, especially in some of the early scenes where 3 gang members are able to kidnap a woman at gunpoint in an airport, and just sort of waltz out of there. Like, they're able to pull guns and shoot at people in an airport. And quite aside from the fact that Dennis Dana and Kurt Russell are able to walk up to the gate to meet people coming off a plane, which is
it was a simpler time then.
It was a different time. Once upon a time, you were able to do that.
Yeah.
I can remember that.
Smoking or non-smoking on an airplane, sir?
It reminds me of flying high with a smoking ticket. But yeah, so you're like, okay, 3 gang members with guns just pulled them out. There's no security.
No.
I mean, like, they're able to like just get in the car outside the airport and leave. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
80s, what a time.
Yep.
But other than that, I mean, the effects, I think, apart from the politics of stealing people from airports, the effects hold up pretty well for the most part. I mean, I was looking at it going, it's not top of the line CGI. Top of the line CGI would look better today, but I think I like this better.
It just further adds into the character and the world that John Carpenter is trying to present to you in the movie. It fits the theme and feel and environment of the movie. I really love where James Hong is sitting in his chair, and that really super bald, liver-spotted head with just a couple of whiffs of long white hair on it just starts pulsating and glowing yellow as he turns into the spirited David Lopan. It looks awesome.
I always like the floating guardian before the eyes. That thing, I mean, it's not perfect, but I like the fact that it's a practical special effect for it.
Yeah.
So absolutely CGI the fuck out of that today.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would look as cool.
For D&D fans who might not have seen this movie, imagine a really dumb-looking beholder. It's got all these tentacles around. It's got a mouth, an eye in its mouth that is on the end of its tongue, and it's just a grotesque floating ball that's just it's a sentry, and it's just sort of making stupid noises. It's pretty fun.
Probably the only effect I don't enjoy in this film is the battle between Egg Shen and Lopan at the end, with their little, with gems or something, and they're shooting
lightsaber crystals.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I think if you had your time again, you might come up with a little bit more of an interesting, conclusion. Well, it is interesting in the sense that Egg Shen and hasn't really been the protagonist of our story, so. Yeah. again, we sort of said it's usually it's a character played by Dennis Dale and Wang Chi, and it's all to some degree for comical purposes Jack Burton, but Egg Shen, but it's really unusual in the film to have the decisive battle fought by a side character essentially.
Yeah. There is one thing that I would like to call out that absolutely nails this into the era of 1980s more than anything else in the whole movie. And that's the fact that this temple for David Lopin's resurrection and resurrection into humanity so he can become a god, basically, they went to the trouble of getting neon lights.
And putting an escalator in.
It's like an underground mall. It's weird.
Nothing says class like, no, David, really, seriously, you'll love the neon, mate. It'll look amazing.
Just imagine it, David Lopin. Okay, you don't have to float. You don't have to do anything. You just stand at the top. The lights are going to be on, and it's just going to carry you down, man.
And it's going to look fabulous.
Strike a pose. People will go nuts.
It'll be fabulous. You won't know. You won't know what hit you. If you're that, there's a scene in that. No, I'm not going to go. There's another '80s film I was going to reference, but I think it's too obscure. But I hadn't noticed the neon. But you're right. It really did look like a food court.
Yeah, and it's that kind of design level of a bad guy's base doesn't happen much anymore. They're very, very urban and
utilitarian.
They're almost clinical in many ways. Where's the personality?
Yeah, give it a bit of like Scorpio's base in the episode of The Simpsons. With the
yes.
France or Italy? No one ever says Italy. This was fun revisiting, even if it is probably the third or fourth time I've seen it this year. Get in and see it now before they ruin it with a remake, though. We haven't had any news about the remake for a couple of years now, so
true.
Might be lucky, and they might get there's a whole bunch of stuff getting chopped right now because of COVID. So maybe this is one of those little projects that they won't actually happen.
Now, I said that I had a plan on where to go, which is why I've been in control of the chain movies for 2. We are going somewhere a little bit different. It's almost as if we're going somewhere previously undiscovered. We are following Kim Cattrall to Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country.
Ooh, yeah. The Cold War Star Trek film.
Yes, I figured it would be a nice antidote for modern day Star Trek, going back to a very cold, calculated Star Trek.
No, it will be. This is one of the good ones.
I know.
Simon Pegg was famous for saying the even-numbered films are the good ones.
But it's true. It's true. So that is where we're going to be going next week, ladies and gentlemen. Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country. The classic, the OG crew of William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, Walter Koenig, Michelle Nichols, George Takei, and then we've got Kim Cattrall in there as Lieutenant Valeris.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. So you might have seen Kim Cattrall from Sex and the City, but yes, she played a Vulcan.
Now, do you want to talk about some of your stuff, or shall I go first?
I can start with one if we like. I actually saw a rare thing this week. A new movie. Not like a movie I haven't seen before. An actual new release type movie.
Okay.
That actually has been credited with a release this year.
Get to the point.
And that is the Russell Crowe action thriller Unhinged.
Okay, where did you watch this?
On the internet. I'm just going to try and remember exactly where it was I got where you can find yourself a copy from. It is actually playing at cinemas in Australia right now. So if you are you are keen to see it, you can in another state of Australia. You can actually just go to an actual cinema. It's showing at the drive-ins here in Melbourne. So if you're near one of the drive-ins, you can go and see it there. And as I sort of said, the only real star of any note in this film is Russell Crowe, who plays Man. That's his character's name is Man. Unnamed Man. So after a confrontation with an unstable man at an intersection, a woman becomes the target of his rage. This is quite a brutal film, and this is an interesting.
Okay.
We're talking about very well-known actors who then take a departure from, playing the roles they're famous for, and heroes, and really go the other way. This is Russ really going left field. I mean, he hasn't played a villain like that. I can't remember the last time he played a villain. Probably going back to the early 90s. He played a serial killer in a Denzel Washington film called Virtuosity,
which is so hard to find now.
I hadn't tried, but I remember it being pretty good.
It was all right.
But see, he's playing a freaking Unhinged is the word. He's a psycho in this movie. The film basically opens with him. We kind of put the pieces together. We're not exactly told, but basically invading his ex-wife's home, beating her and her lover to death, and then setting the house on fire.
Wow. Okay.
We don't see this necessarily, but we are outside the house. I mean, I'm not giving you spoilers. It happens in the first 2 minutes of the film. Okay. But you can sort of see, obviously, we are detached a bit. That's the insinuation of what we're looking at, and through further dialogue later in the film. So he is basically, he's a guy who's lost everything and has kind of lost his marbles as a result, unhinged, if you will. And we sort of crept between, after seeing him perform this incredibly violent act, we sort of cut to learn about our protagonist of the film, Rachel, played by Karen Pistorius, which is an unfortunate surname considering the only other Pistorius I know is Oscar. And if you don't know who that is, Google him. And she's not been in anything I've seen before. She was in Mortal Engines, which I think you've seen.
Yeah.
But I'm not familiar with most of her work, though I think she's actually South African Kiwi sort of hodgepodge. Anyway, so she is a young mother with a son named Kyle, and we see her sort of scurrying around trying to get ready in a hurry in the morning to get to work on time and get the kid to school on time, while there's some sort of problem. It's meaning that the traffic's backed up like crazy that morning. On her way to work, we see she's having a pretty bad fucking day because she gets fired on her way to work because she's going to be late. Only when at that point in time does she bump into Russell Crowe's Man character, who is sitting at a red light, green light, but not moving. So she honks him, and that was a mistake.
Okay.
And that sets him off. All you got to do is honk the guy, and basically from there it turns into the two films that probably reminded me of most of from that point in time were Falling Down.
I was going to say, yeah.
And Duel, the Steven Spielberg film, which of course is the story of a truck and a car playing a cat and mouse game over a day. And obviously, if you've seen Falling Down, it's sort of a guy, losing
having a really bad day,
basically having a really bad day and having a breakdown, and it sort of going left field in a very violent way. This is not either of those films. It's not anywhere near the quality of either of those films. It is not qualified to carry the bags of those films.
Okay.
But you can see their influence in the story. And so basically it turns into not even a cat and mouse game, basically a freaking romp, a brutal romp through her life. Russell Crowe is quite good, has basically got nothing left to lose, and decides to make this Rachel, Karen Pistorius' character, the beneficiary of his vitriol for the day. And vitriol is expressed in an extremely violent manner. This is a really nasty film. Just another way to describe it was nasty. It was unpleasant, really unpleasant. It made me feel dirty watching it. I felt like I wanted to take a shower afterwards. I don't know if you've ever seen it made you feel that way. And there was Russell Crowe's motivation was very poorly defined. And other than the fact that he sort of said, I'm the biggest, most worthless man in the world or something like that, basically giving an indication that his wife has left him, he's lost his job kind of thing. And, nothing left to lose kind of character. And, but at the same time, it's very, very weak motivation. And his motivation for fucking with Rachel is very, very weak. When she honked him and she just decides to make her life miserable and in a really brutal way. And then it also stretches credulity a few times. Like he does stuff. I'm not going to spoil it in case someone wants to see it, but he does things and you're kind of like, yeah, where are the fucking cops, right? Because, At the start of the film, there's like Rachel's watching a news story going, "Oh, a man murdered 2 people in his house, and the police are looking for him, a man in a large grey truck. So they know who he is and know what car he drives." Right? But he's able to romp around town and like.
Where is this set? Is this like unidentified city, America, Australia?
It's in the United States. It is an American film. It's not. I don't think we know exactly what city it is. I'm not sure.
Because just looking at the poster for it, it's like the big thing aside from Russell Crowe is Unhinged. It's got the tagline, "He can happen to anyone." That kind of sounds like what you're saying about this movie trying to be horrible and trying to scare you rather than tell a story of something that is horrible. It is almost like scare tactics.
Absolutely. It's more like a horror film, I would say, than an action thriller. Like I would say, Falling Down would be an action thriller because if you go back and see Falling Down again, now I haven't seen it for a while, but there's a lot of subtext going on in that film. That's that film's saying something. There's a message in there from Joel Schumacher in that film.
Yeah.
But this one has no message other than bad men hurt people. Rah, drive
scared of everyone.
Yeah. There's stuff like him where he would be sitting right behind her and he's crashing his car into her car, like softly, banging his car into the back of her car. It's surrounded by traffic. No one does anything. No one's calling police. There's no slight spoiler here, but he basically beats someone to death in a diner full of people, and nobody does anything.
Welcome to Texas, bitch.
In fairness, one thing I'll say about like the only good thing this film has really going for it is the fact it's got Russell Crowe in it. Like this is an absolute B movie, that somehow managed to attract A-list talent. If Russ is still A-list talent today, I still think Russ is a very capable actor, given the right role and the right script, and he does what he can with this character. He is genuinely menacing. Like I think I go back to that film Virtuosity. I remember he played a serial killer. I'm like, I remember thinking he's really good at this. He should do stuff like this more often, and he really hasn't.
No.
But I wish he shows some real skill at playing a really menacing villain. And I assume he's wearing prosthetics. I don't know if or he just put on a shit ton of weight because he's genuinely huge. He looks huge compared to everybody else in this film. Not necessarily like fat huge, but just like a real unit, bulky. He is a huge guy compared to everybody else. So that's probably the only saving grace in the scene where he beats the guy to death in the diner. He's just compared to everybody else around him. He is so big and so intimidatingly large. You go, well, maybe I wouldn't tackle him either.
Yeah. Well, Russell Crowe is one of those guys that kind of made, especially earlier in his career, he made a bit of a name for himself by being semi-method and being really, really brutal and hard and hardy. He's always been... he's always pushed himself to his limit. And there's always, especially in his earlier stuff, like I'm thinking Romper Stomper, where he's fucking volatile, and his character in LA Confidential, he's like a good guy, a nice guy, but he's shown as muscly and strong and kind of almost like a barbarian trying to figure out the smart process, but realizing, no, I do my talking with my fists kind of thing.
He's so good in that movie.
All right, that's a fantastic movie, full stop. But yeah, he's amazing.
Look, I mean, there's a reason this film got dropped in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe this would have gone straight to streaming at a different time. I was kind of surprised it didn't now, considering, I mean, I don't know how much money you're going to make at the cinema these days, but I mean, it would have been, it would have disappeared beneath the waves of higher profile material under normal conditions. I would struggle to recommend it. Like, I would really struggle to say. I can't say I enjoyed it. I didn't hate it at the same time. And just like I said, it was nasty and unpleasant and nihilistic. Okay.
It sounds like it's not even trying to be liked.
Not really. I mean, if it was, it failed. And I mean, I didn't even get the catharsis at the end of it. Where, if it's a slasher film, every film has this place. If it's a slasher film and it's a slasher film you're going in to see, that's fine, right? That can be a lot of fun. Yeah. But there's a catharsis at the end where you have usually the heroine, takes down the slasher at the end of a film with a quippy one-liner and walks away into the sunset kind of thing, and you're kind of like, okay, well, at least it was pure escapist entertainment and I enjoyed it for what it was. In this film, I just didn't get even that sense of catharsis at the end to go. I mean, like, spoilers: Russell Crowe dies in the end. Shocker! All right, I know.
He can come back. Death isn't the end.
Well, he could be like, Clark Gregg in the Avengers. But he dies at the end, and then obviously they drive away, and you kind of like, I must have feeling like I just have this pervasive sense of unpleasantness, and like I said, felt a bit dirty having watched it. I'm like, after what he's done to her and her family during the course of a story, you're kind of like, I don't think I'd be driving away smiling after that. No, sorry, Bob. It's a B movie with an A-grade actor doing his absolute best in the lead role. I don't know why Russ wanted to do this, but they're very lucky he did. Otherwise, this would have been straight to video material.
Okay. All right.
What's on your agenda for this week?
So my new movie released in 2020 was actually it's a remake of a classic Hitchcock movie, Rebecca. Now this is one that came out on Netflix only about maybe 3 weeks ago, and it is not my sort of movie. I love Hitchcock movies, but Rebecca was one that I never got around to. The original was from 1940. This one is directed by Ben Wheatley,
who's an acquired taste.
Yeah, he's definitely got a style. This is his... Out of the movies that I've watched of his, this is the easiest to watch, but there is still definitely his style across the whole thing. Like, a few years ago for the Halloween movie session, we watched Kill List, which was a bizarre movie from 2011. And then in 2015, he produced a Tom Hiddleston led High Rise. He's kind of got this unusual style and unusual mannerism of a movie that you either can appreciate or you just don't want it at all. It's not that you don't get it, because you're probably gonna get his movies. He's not exactly the most subtle of guys in telling a story, but it's just like, no, that's not the sort of thing that I like. I don't care. I'm not going to judge it in any way, whether it's quality or not. It's just something I don't like. I find his stuff really interesting. I don't know necessarily if I like it, but this is kind of good, and that's unusual to say about a Netflix movie. It stars
you seem to be the one, because its reviews are not good.
No, it's true, but there's something about it that really plays with me, because they on IMDb they say that number one, this movie is a drama, mystery, romance, and thriller. I don't think that's really right. I think it's a psychological horror in a social manner, because I'll just call out the cast, because the three big players in it are all great in it. Lily James plays Mrs. De Winter, the new Mrs. De Winter. Armie Hammer, who I have so much respect for over the last few movies that he's come out with. He's showing some good acting chops. He's developing really nicely as an actor. And Kristen Scott Thomas, who is pretty much always amazing. And for those who don't know, it's a young newlywed. A young newlywed arrives at her husband's imposing family estate on a wind-swept English coast and finds herself battling the shadows of his first wife, Rebecca, whose legacy lives on in the house long after her death. And that is the plot but it's not the story. The story is so much more twisting, turning, private, close. There's elements of the upstairs, downstairs kind of aristocracy that was played out in
Mansfield
Downton
Park.
Abbey, Gosford Park. Yes,
Yeah,
anything like that. But it's a very largely a very, very focused movie on Lily James's character, and she starts off as just basically a put upon aide to this grotty woman of mild popularity in social circles in I think it's Monte Carlo, or one of these very, very beautiful, decadent, high class, high society places, and she accidentally meets Armie Hammer's Maxim de Winter. They hit it off, and in a whirlwind of romance that they play these really lovely scenes, and you get these little snippets of a broken character coming out of Armie Hammer. He's very charming, he's very affable and very open, and he doesn't care about the society gap between him and Lily James's character. But then every now and then, these little tiny moments just come in, and he turns on a dime, and he can be really scary. And as someone who hadn't watched Rebecca, I wasn't sure if this was kind of like a domestic abuse kind of thing, where so often Hitchcock movies kind of twist the characters and they end up becoming one thing or another. That's not the case. He's a broken man in so many ways, but as the story progresses and as Lily James learns more about him, and when they go to this beautiful estate that he owns and is run by Kirsten Scott Thomas's Mrs. Danvers, you find that, yes, he's the lord of the manor, but there's not really much that he's actually in control of, and he is in many ways, he's a puppet unto his own things, and this looming, hellish, untouchable, godlike presence that is Rebecca, his ex-wife, his former wife. It just looms and just continuously gets bigger and bigger and bigger in the whole movie, and you never once see her. You don't see her in any flashbacks or anything like that. It is just her presence that is felt, and the kind of existence, her personality exists beyond, and the people that knew her, that loved her, that hated her, that were obsessed with her, that reviled against her. And poor Lily James' character is repeatedly battered and beaten from one to another, while she just wants to be in this such honest and beautiful and charming romance with Maxim. It's really good, and it plays itself so well. It's quiet. It's not trying to do anything flashy or fancy. It's a movie that doesn't really get made anymore, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like it. I'm a very big Hitchcock fan. And
seems like you're in a hiding to nothing trying to remake Hitchcock, though.
Oh, you're never really going to be able to do it. The closest that I think before this someone got was there was basically a Hitchcock variant called Grand Piano with Elijah Wood and John Cusack. That was pretty good, but it lost it in the end. This maintains its character and its personality and its attitude and the story that it wants to tell. It starts it and finishes it strongly. This is a very well-rounded movie overall. I don't think many people are going to like it, and the reviews kind of mirroring what I think people will like. But if you like that more old school, very
it's old school. It's old school code for slow.
Yes, it is. It is slow. But there's also this kind of borderline, kind of Gone with the Wind, epic romance feel to it that will frustrate people who want to go in for it as a romance, because Ben Wheatley is like, yeah, that's there, but that ain't my focus, so you are going to be unfulfilled. Sorry. This is a movie that wants to put you, the audience, in an uncomfortable position and emulate how Lily Collins' character feels throughout the whole thing. Lily James, sorry. You are feeling what she feels throughout this whole thing. You are her character, and it does that really, really well. But you are going to be put through the ringer. And most people aren't going to like the way that she is treated, the way that she feels. And by the end of it, there is kind of comeuppance and the cathartic release, but it's still kind of, it's not that typical Hollywood, yay, the good guys won, I feel good, everything's worked out, it's great, everyone's grown, everyone's developed. It's like, okay, what I wanted to happen happened, but I still feel a little unfulfilled, which is, again, very much in her character. So it captures the character really, really well. I think that's what Ben Wheatley seems to be really good at doing, is making the audience feel like the person this story is following.
Okay, well, it's certainly a departure for him. I think that any Ben Wheatley film I remember seeing is that film we saw a few years ago, Kill List, which was... as you noted. Oh, no, I saw Freeze Fire as well. That was shit.
I liked parts of that.
It was shit. It was fucking awful. But I hated it. But then again, I suspect, watching two of his films now, I suspect that's Wheatley's jam, right? Like, he's one of those directors.
Yeah.
People are going to go, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Todd Saldons, who made Welcome to a Dollhouse and... a few other films like that. If you know who he is, you know who he is, right? He was sort of like a bizarre filmmaker du jour in the late 90s, early 2000s. Happiness is another one of his. And if he's just one of these guys, like, I get his stuff, right? Yeah. I remember going, this guy is a fucking genius. Yeah. But, like, I reckon 90% of people who watch his films go, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
And he's just one of those guys who splits them. You know, there's no middle ground.
Yeah. There seems to be, like, Britain in particular, maybe it's just because I'm British and I like to spot the local grown talent, I guess. But every now and then this name pops up that just suddenly appears and has this identity, like Shane Meadows. I love a lot of Shane Meadows' work, but there are people who just go, no, This Is England was it for me. That's all I liked of his stuff. Go away with the rest of it.
I like that film. Yeah, I haven't seen any of his other stuff.
Dead Man's Shoes is one of my favorite horror movies. It's fantastic. Paddy Considine is awesome. Love it.
I have not seen anything else he's done. But I did like This Is England. That was a good movie.
Yeah. But if you like to be challenged by a movie in the way of being put into that character, you possibly like Rebecca, but I can't really recommend it because it's a hard movie to recommend because it is trying something that is not the norm. It does what it wants to do very well, but that's for a very niche audience.
Got to give kudos to someone who's trying to do something difficult.
Absolutely. I respect the actors, the performances of Lily James, Armie Hammer, and Kristen Scott Thomas because they are flawless in their character delivery. It's really wonderful.
I keep seeing Hubie Halloween pop up on my Netflix, and I keep thinking to myself, you know, okay, whether or not Ben Wheatley got this film right, he's trying to do something quite difficult.
Yes.
And he's got to go. Adam Sandler was trying to hit a 1-inch putt and missed. So, interestingly, Ben Wheatley is attached to direct a Tomb Raider film and a sequel to The Meg.
Oh, okay.
That does not seem like his normal fare.
No, maybe he's trying to do a little bit of the Guillermo del Toro thing of big movie, indie movie, big movie, indie movie, and slowly trying to merge those two together. But they seem really weird departures for Ben. Really weird departures. I like this one, though. The name of this project? Mega Evil Motherfuckers.
Meg 2?
Yeah. Ooh, he is attached to do Hard Boiled. Now, that could be interesting because that's based on a Frank Miller comic that is weird.
I assume that's not a remake of the John Woo film.
No, it's completely different. That could be an interesting, like when the first Sin City came out, and it was a great match of fun story, interesting production design, and just that good marrying of all the talent involved. Could have something good happen there, but I don't know whether there's much of an audience for it.
Well, the last John, it was the sequel they did to that wasn't very good, from what I heard, and never was the spirit.
I don't know why it took so long for them to get around to the sequel, but they should have done it straight away, and it probably would have fared a bit better. But it just felt tired and unnecessary.
Speaking of films using extensive green screen, Liam Neeson is arriving in Melbourne this week to shoot a movie here in Melbourne.
Okay.
And
I thought you were talking about his time on Star Wars Episode 1.
Well, interesting you mentioned Star Wars is because they're going to use a similar type of technology they use to making The Mandalorian. So you kind of go, why are you making a film in a semi-lockdown city? They're going to be filming at the Melbourne Convention Centre.
Okay. Maybe they need a stadium.
It's been converted into a studio.
Well, that's a clever use of the space while no one's allowed to go there.
There's no Comic-Con or, Bridal Expo or anything. But anyway, interesting to see what those films look out. They get Ben Wheatley direct your Tomb Raider sequel. Yeah, that's going to go really, really differently.
Yeah, but who knows? I mean, to be honest, the bar for Tomb Raider movies is not exactly high.
True, though. None of them have been very good.
Yeah.
I was going to say the Alicia Vikander film was okay, but it really wasn't that great.
No, it really wasn't. It was unnecessary, boring, and that is the worst thing that an action movie can be. Boring.
It's true. What else has been on your plate this week?
The only other thing that I've really had time to rewatch is decided to go back to an oldish sci-fi, the remake of Battlestar Galactica.
It's a TV show?
Yes, it is. It's on Stan, and it is heralded as one of the modern classics of TV shows. It was very, very groundbreaking for its time. It used a lot of that almost gonzo journalistic style filming of close-ups and handheld. There was a lot of plaudits praised for its depiction of space battles with the Vipers versus the Cylon Raiders and things, and the minimal use of noise, because obviously no noise in space. It was very interesting. But over the course of, I think there's 5 seasons of it, the last 2 seasons certainly split the audience as it got a little bit too involved in faith, shall we say. But I'm going through it, and I'm halfway through season 2 now. And while the CGI doesn't really age very well, it was at a point where, for the time, it looked pretty good. But now it definitely looks old. It looks tired. It doesn't look out of place because it was filmed well. The whole design of everything was well implemented. But it just looks a bit tired. But the storytelling, the acting, and the direction of the episodes is great. It remains really strong. It's a very interesting type of story that we very rarely get anymore. It's trying to be political. It's trying to be intelligent. It is trying to be engaging in a way that it's not all about the action sequences. There are episodes where it's just people talking, and there's almost an element of kind of West Wing style conversation and debate between why should the military and the police be run entirely different. And Edward James Olmos is fantastic as Adama. Mary McDonald, I think it's Mary McDonald. I've just got to pull up.
Yeah, you're right. She played the first lady in Independence Day.
Yes, and she was president.
So, a question: were you a fan of the original?
I was. That as Star Trek and Doctor Who were the sci-fi shows that I grew up on. I remember characters of Starbuck and Apollo, and it's so great. I still go back to them, and those are awful episodes now. They are really not great, but there's still that nostalgia factor for them, and I do like to pop back every now and then because, oh boy, things. It was a time capsule for a type of society that I'm glad doesn't permeate too easily into modern society anymore, for one thing. But I, like many people, when they first announced that they were doing this, it was like, okay, really? I mean, I enjoyed it, but do they want to go back to that? It was kind of cheesy and hokey, and it wasn't a show that was taken seriously, as in, oh, this is trying to give a message. This is just, oh, it's sci-fi is big right now, so let's make a sci-fi show. Then they came out with the miniseries, and everyone was like, oh, they're just using the original show as kind of a launching point. And yeah, you get occasional, like some of the pilots are named after characters in the original, or you get the theme song come in as like this military riff that occasionally permeates through. But otherwise, it's like, nope, we're telling our thing, and we're telling a serious story right here. We're telling the trials and tribulations of the last survivors of a fucking civilization, as they are being mercilessly hunted by robots who have their own agenda.
And plan on instituting their own world with blackjack and hookers. But here's a question for you. If I haven't seen the original, which I haven't, am I likely to enjoy it as much, do you think?
I think you'd potentially really enjoy this. You do not need to watch the original to watch this. You don't need to kind of carry over any kind of information. It's nice that there are those little pop moments of, hey, Starbuck, that's a character I know, or the noise of the Cylon, that sort of stuff. It's cool that they have those in there, but otherwise it's just like, okay, that's terrifying. As this, you just hear this it's actually played really well for the effect that it's trying to distill. The performers are all really great, and they, because of the miniseries, which I do recommend watching first before going into the actual series. There's only 4 episodes, I think, in the miniseries. It's all available on Stan. It sets everything up really well, and you do feel like it is the true beginning of a journey. And through the miniseries, you will quickly work out, okay, yep, I want to stick with this, or no, that's not for me.
So I remember watching it when I was on television, but I don't know what I got in at the ground floor. Like, I don't think I got it on episode 1. But because you're right, there was a plethora of sci-fi and television at the time. We had we had Star Trek, Enterprise, I think, or Voyager, Enterprise at that point. We had Stargate, Stargate Atlantis, and then we had Farscape as well.
Yeah.
If you're in America, you had a season of Firefly. Yeah. And then you had this. So it was really a lot of that going on, which is unusual.
Yeah.
And Farscape was shot here. A lot of it was made here in Australia. Yeah. So I actually tried very hard to get the Farscape, because a lot of people, it's one of those things. If you like Trek, you should like Farscape. I didn't, and I didn't like the few episodes of Battlestar Galactica I saw either. But like I said, I was coming in halfway through a season because it was on television at the time, right? If you didn't catch episode 1, well, fuck you.
Yeah. This storytelling is season long. There are 1 or 2 episodes each season which are more or less standalone, but it is one big storyline because it is true ensemble. You have got so many moving parts and characters all over the place, and their allegiances changing, and them going away for a while, coming back, and having life on the show, and it all interweaving and connecting. So you can't just randomly jump in and out because it's like, wait, what the fuck? I have no. It would be so fucking impossible to enjoy watching it that way.
Maybe if I have time and the other shows run out, I might check it out because despite our increased freedom, I'm still. Melbourne right now is a bit of a funny place. You go to the shops, you have to make a fucking booking to go to Kmart. I'm not doing that.
No, especially to go to Kmart.
Exactly. I'm like, people are going to Kmart, and you're like, why exactly? Anyway,
I saw that people were crying when they were entering Kmart,
and they lined up at midnight to go to Kmart, and I'm like, I just don't need shit that badly. I have stuff delivered to me, but so I mean, we're allowed to go out a little bit more, but I'm still myself staying home a lot more, like we talked about earlier, to avoid the fuckwits. So maybe I will have time to check out some of Battlestar Galactica and see what the fuss is about.
Like I say, anyone who is interested, start with the miniseries, because by the end of it, it has a good, complete story that is not too big to kind of go, oh, that's a big time investment or anything like that. If you like it, you will enjoy the rest of it. If you don't like it, you haven't wasted 22 episodes worth of seasons to kind of come to a point of, well, fuck you, George.
Well, look, we've talked about it. Regular listeners will realize our tastes diverge, okay? Occasionally.
Yes.
Just
like 5 out of 7 times.
But at the same time, it is an iconic science fiction series, and like I might like it. I probably need to give it a red hot go to find out for sure.
What about you? What else have you been watching?
I'd like to talk about 2 other things. I know we're getting a bit long, but that never happens. Never. One is a documentary series which is screening on Stan at the moment in Australia, and that is called Seduced, Inside the Nexium Cult. And people who know me, I love a good cult. Love a good cult. And, and when I'm not watching the news about the cult in America right now, I'm watching a different American cult. This one has fortunately ceased to be, unlike the other one. And this is some people might have heard about this one because it actually made the news in the last couple of weeks in the sense the leader of this cult got sent to jail for 120 years.
Which deservedly so, but just sounds so dumb.
It's a very, very American thing to give people giant sentences they'll never be able to do. Oh, sentence to 800 years.
Yeah.
Well, after about 50, it really doesn't matter a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
So there are a couple of different documentaries about this cult on at the moment. There's one on in the States. I can't remember the name of it, but it's not Seduced. A friend of mine in the States has told me about it. But this one particularly follows India Oxenberg's abuse and her own culpability inside the Nexium cult, an organization marketed as a self-help group. So this one, I'm not sure about the other series. This one really focuses through the prism of India Oxenberg, who was a member of a Nexium cult for like 10, 12 years. The reason why she is notable is she is the daughter of Catherine Oxenberg, who was a reasonably well-known actor in things like Dynasty. She is also, I think, she's also European royalty. Catherine Oxenberg is related to the Yugoslavian royal family, well known. And so India is her daughter, who has done some rough acting around the place. She was in Starship Troopers. Can you believe that? She played Kid. But she joins the cult, and we explore her experiences of the cult. Through her stories about what went on. And it's look, I guess it's not really particularly revelatory in the sense you've seen any documentaries about cult, you've seen documentaries about Jonestown or Scientology, which there are some excellent documentaries about those out there. It's kind of sounds a little bit familiar. It kind of just their entry point isn't particularly sinister. It's like a little bit like Scientology. They for years had a way of getting people in was to say, hey, free personality tests.
Yeah,
and you go into the Scientology Center and you do the E-meter test, and they go, oh, you've got some sort of underlying trauma, blah, blah, blah. And, hopefully they'll try and get you hooked from there. So that's their in. Is they seem like a self-help program or a way of bettering yourself. And you take courses and you can do better. I remember I worked with a Scientologist once who actually ran some of his courses in the call center I worked in, which was interesting.
Wow.
And because he actually managed to convince the higher ups that they were self-help programs. So Nexium kind of is a cult that borrowed a lot of ideas from a lot of different places, including Scientology. And a lot of it, you're sort of watching it, and you go, there's a function that they do when you go to one of their meetings called EM. I can't remember what it actually stands for. I'm like, oh, that's auditing. That's right. That's auditing. That's auditing from Scientology. And they're like, oh, yeah, we borrowed it from Scientology. I'm like, boom, I watched too many of these shows. I've never been to a Scientology center, and I know what it is. But that was their in. Their in was that they were an executive success program, I think, was it?
Yeah.
What they called themselves. And they, you went to these classes and they helped you, make sense of the world and better yourself and yada, yada, yada. The guy who ran it, the guy who got sent to jail, Keith Rainier, actually was a convicted crook already at that point in time from running a pyramid scheme in the 80s.
Yeah.
But, whatevs, right? And
that just builds character.
And so, there were some what I guess makes this fairly notable was it's fairly bizarre, as with most cults, it gets sexual. It sort of gets into some fairly bizarre facets of that, in the sense that they ended up being slaves to other members. So basically, this guy Rainier started a sex pyramid scheme inside the cult, and where he had like 5 or 6 people who were slaves to him, and each of them had 3 or 4 slaves, and each of those slaves had 3 or 4 slaves. And he was sort of trying to use this to sort of build a network of people he thought could change the world with. And all of which were basically available to him whenever he wanted them for sexual purposes.
Yep.
Now, where
it is branded as well.
They were branded. There was actually, I just got to that episode that's just when it's airing. It's one of the annoying shows where there are 4 episodes, but they're only airing them one every week.
How dare they do things traditionally?
And it's annoying. So they actually use a branding pen to actually draw a symbol on their bodies, which is super weird. And I guess the other part of it that made it very notable, apart from the bizarre sexual nature of the cult, was some of the people involved, some of whom are actually pretty well, or not super famous, but reasonably well-known actors, including Ashley Mack, is that her name?
Alison Mack.
Alison Mack, who didn't actually know who she was before the cult, but she was in Smallville.
Yeah.
And there was a guy called Mark Vicente involved, who was he was a director who directed a documentary in the early 2000s called "What the Bleak Do We Know," which I remember seeing and quite liking. And there was at least one other actor in there whose name escapes me right now. But again, she wasn't super famous. But you look at her IMDb page, she's done a bit of stuff. And these were kind of people who managed to were kind of senior members of a cult. The more, again, a little bit like Scientology, the more famous you were, the more fast track your path through the cult was. And that was part of a reason, I think. That's how India sees it. Part of a reason why they wanted her and her mother on board so badly was that they would be almost a convincing factor for people.
Legitimacy.
Legitimizing the cult. Well, European royalty are involved, right? Like famous people.
Europeans aren't weird about sex or anything.
No. Have you seen Benny Hill? Catherine, no doubt, she was a little bit more of a nose of these things. India, though, was locked in for a number of years. But yeah, it's an interesting documentary. It's reasonably well made. As I said, I haven't seen the other documentary about Nexium. It's out there. I don't know if it's been released in Australia yet. It's called Vow. That's what it's called. But this one, I guess, its only weakness is in the sense that it focuses solely on India's experiences, which of course are relevant and very relevant. And it's great to hear. It's fascinating to hear. Not great. It's fascinating to hear firsthand the experiences they went through. But it looks like Val might have had a little bit more access to other people. So I don't know when that's airing in Australia. It's an HBO. That's probably going to be on Foxtel. But yeah, I would say if you're like me and you like your a film that's true crimey in a way, if you like your stuff about cults, it's worth a look because it's quite a bizarre story, and it's just yet another one of those things where you sit there and go, intelligent, educated, successful people fall for this shit. I mean, not maybe. I am a fucking cynic, a curmudgeon, a grumpy curmudgeon, but like, I don't believe anybody ever. I remember being in Paris with my now ex-wife, and we were at the Eiffel Tower, and I was sculling a tinny. That is true. That happened.
I don't know if you've said anything more Australian. I was in Paris sculling a tinny.
I actually took a photo. It was a tinny, a tower. I did have a tinny, and that was, I walked a block out of my way to go to a supermarket so I could get a tinny. And this guy with like a very cute dog came up and started talking to us, and I'm like, fucking, what does this guy want? He's going to ask for money. What the fuck does this guy want? What does he want? He's super friendly. People aren't this friendly.
You just have images of you as a child hearing something at Christmas, running out, seeing Santa Claus and going, what do you want?
Drop the presents now. Slowly.
Now back away.
But my now ex-wife was far more trusting and friendly than I was, and he was engaged this guy in conversation for 10 minutes, and then he left. He didn't ask for anything. I was just, the whole time I had my hands in my pockets, like going, what the fuck is this guy's? Where are these guys, like, accessories? He's going to try and rob us. But
well, Travis, I've got something to tell you now. It has been a long, long time getting to this point, but look behind you.
It's a dog. It was even when it was the bears, I knew it was you. So I don't trust anybody ever. So like, everybody's trying to scam you. Usually, but people are very friendly. Usually they're trying. It's like when in certainly when I do travel in parts of the United States with friends, and like in rural Pennsylvania, I travel quite regularly in that part of the world. And I've been walking down the street in these towns, and people are like, "Good morning," and you'd be like, "The fuck you say to me?" Like, people are talking to me. Why are people talking to me? Did he say good morning? Why are they talking to me? Why did he say good? Why would he? I don't know that guy. Why would he say good morning to me? And so, when people get friendly, I get suspicious. But at least that means I have no actual human connection on a regular basis. But I'm not a member of a cult, so swings and roundabouts.
We are a cult, thank you.
only for tax purposes.
Sweet tax money.
Now, one more I'd like to quickly mention.
Yes.
This one I've just started watching, and it is on Netflix, and that is The Queen's Gambit.
Queen's Gambit. Okay. What is The Queen's Gambit?
Orphaned at 9, prodigious introvert Beth Harmon discovers and masters the game of chess in 1960s USA, but child stardom comes at a price.
Okay.
So this stars Anna Taylor-Joy, who looks extraordinarily familiar when I look at her, but it took me a minute to remember where she was from. She was in Split, and Glass, and she was in The Witch, which I think you and I endured at the Cinema Nova, or at least I know I did. I think you were there. It was one of the most.
I don't think I watched that, actually.
You should be eternally grateful for that, because it's a fucking awful, boring shit film. And no, people think it's genius, but no, they're wrong. It's awful. And yeah, no, she plays the Beth Harmon, who is the introvert who learns how to play chess. Now, I am only 2 episodes into a 7-episode season.
Okay.
Interesting factoid I learned about this. This has been floating around for a while. Heath Ledger wanted this to be his directorial debut. As it turns out, that didn't happen.
No.
For unknown reasons. It is the creator, and I imagine showrunner is a guy named Scott Frank. Scott Frank's probably best known work of late. He wrote Logan.
Yep.
He also wrote the Wolverine and Marley and Me, and but anyway,
Minority Report.
he wrote Logan, which was very good. This is really quite enjoyable, I must say. I sort of very reluctantly jumped into the first episode, and I'm like, 20 minutes in, I was like, I don't know about this. It seemed a really generic story about, the opening shot of a season. Beth's parents die in a car crash. She's taken to an orphanage. And you're kind of like, yeah, I've seen TV shows where kids taken to orphanages, right?
Yeah.
It's not, this is going to do all the things I think it's going to do.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't really.
Okay.
It kind of subverts, it's where it got me interested because, there's a whole lot of memes and, tropes about, orphanage movies and, asylum movies. And it looks a bit like something out of American Horror Story. But, you're expecting to be run by, evil, sadistic,
We are going to take you to the basement now to begin treatment.
Exactly, like electroshock therapy or something. But, and you expect the people to run it to be bastards, but the people running it kind of, but at the same time, they're not exactly benevolent. They actually seem like human beings.
Okay.
She is taught to play chess by the janitor, Mr. Scheibel, played by Bill Camp. And instantly, Bill Camp, when I was looking through, how on the IMDb app, it's sort of like, it'll actually show you know him from all these movies that you've rated on IMDb. And I was going for all the movies I've rated with him in it. I'm like, he's in heaps of stuff. He was in Joker last year as one of the police officers, Birdman, 12 Years a Slave, Lincoln, Compliance, which if you haven't seen Compliance, get your hands on it. It's a fucking great movie. Public Enemies, Reservation Road, all sorts, In and Out, Rounders. He's in heaps of shit. He's just one of those faces you would not know his name, but he's in stuff. And he teaches her to play chess. And, we quickly learn that she's got a real knack for it. And that she's, by the end of the second episode, we're starting to really see that come into play. And, again, she's been spoilers. If you don't want to know anything more about this series, like I said, only 2 episodes in, but tune out now if you don't want to know any more. But she is adopted in the second episode. And again, there are a whole lot of tropes about adopted children who are adopted by, teenager girls who are adopted. And there are a couple of points in time where her adoptive father sort of looks at her sideways and you kind of like,
here it comes.
Okay, you're going to do exactly what I think you're going to do. And then it doesn't. So he sort of goes, oh no, I went right. And it actually, by the end of the second episode, again, like we have stuff happen during the second episode of her adoptive parents. Again, spoiler alert. I've already given you one. The dad leaves the mother. So her adoptive father leaves her adoptive mother in the second episode.
Okay.
But again, you're kind of thinking, again, there's a whole array of tropes that you expect to be rolled out in that scenario. And by the end of the second episode, when you actually see how the mother is reacting to Beth's increasing, fame / skill / accomplishment, it's in chess, it goes in another direction. I mean, I'm very curious to watch the next episode and go, okay, what's next? Because it's what it did at the end of the second episode, kind of go, okay, that's dark. That's interesting. I like it. So it keeps subverting my expectations every time just because there's, as I said, there's an expected response and it's taking the path less traveled at each opportunity so far. And I'm liking that. Cool. So by the end of the second episode, it's really got me on board. I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes next. And I'm just curious, what is it about chess? There's a lot of movies and TV shows made about a sport game that isn't very cinematic.
Yeah, and there was that Tobey Maguire one from a couple of years ago.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, and it always seems to be like this bizarrely hyper stressful underlay of way more going on. I mean, maybe that's just sort of like, hey, we're taking the notion of chess and the games and the different layers and the sacrifices that we play. We're going to literally consistently inject that into every chess movie ever made. Or maybe chess is just actually the most dramatic sport in the world, and no one knows.
Real question. Why hasn't there been a chess boxing film made yet? That's the film I want to see.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the last Fast and Furious checkmate. Where, you know, Diesel takes up chess as a hobby while recovering from a broken leg after a car crash.
Look, now that you put it out there, we have now got a proven track record of being tastemakers in the COVID-19 environment. You just know it's going to be a matter of time before chess boxing is going to be released on Netflix, starring Adam Sandler, featuring Will Ferrell
and Kevin James.
Yep. It's going to be Here Comes the Boom meets shit or shitter.
Yeah, well, you said that already because you said Adam Sandler. Anna Taylor-Joy has been cast as Furiosa, apparently, in the Mad Max spin-off.
Very curious.
She's 2 episodes in. She's a very fine actress.
Mm-hmm.
I can see her pulling off a decent Charlize look. Shave the head. Maybe at some point. Obviously, they probably won't start her off like that. But what can I say? In George Miller, we trust.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how long New Mutants is going to sit on the shelf before it is released, because she is also in that.
Yeah, you're joking, right?
Oh, about the actual release of that movie?
Because it had to come out.
Wait, it has?
It was released.
It was?
Yes, a couple of months ago.
Wow. Oh.
You didn't get the memo.
I had no clue.
Yeah, if you have a look, it's got 422 user reviews, 119 critic reviews. There you go.
Now, are you sure it's actually been released, or it's not just people reviewing a movie that has not come out?
It was released. It was released. I remember seeing all reviews on YouTube. You'll be shocked to know it wasn't very good.
Okay, the New Mutants. I want to see where it's available, because
I think it maybe not in Victoria at all, but it was released elsewhere, right?
Yeah, by the looks of it, 65% is it, and 5.5 on IMDb.
We should host a watching party when we're allowed to watch it legally.
Yes,
we've been talking about it for 2 years. I think.
I know, and I don't think our expectation of it has got above. It's got to be shit.
I think from what I understand, it's a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of a film in a sense that like Josh Boone, the writer-director, started out with, please make this film. And then, could you maybe recut it to make it look a little bit more like a horror film? Or, they seem to change direction on this film 2 or 3 different times.
Yeah.
And I don't think that a film or any piece of art benefits from that kind of thing. I think of a record like Chinese Democracy, the Guns N' Roses record, which I think is okay. But you can sort of he worked on it for like 15 years or something. So you can sort of see the different kind of idea threads that he was going off on that thing. It didn't really make a whole. And I feel like from what I've read anyway, New Mutants kind of suffered from a similar fate, and it was sort of all overshot. But up for Josh Boone, I'm very excited to see his next project being The Stand.
Yeah, me too. I have just started listening to the Audible book of The Stand, and I can't wait. I hope it's good. Please, I hope it's not under the dome.
Don't fuck it up, please. But anyway, we are off topic, which never happens. No. If you've got Netflix, I think The Queen's Gambit is a nice little piece of escapism from a cold and uncaring world.
All right. Well, that's our show for this week, ladies and gentlemen. We delivered a fairly, actually meatier than I was expecting review of Big Trouble in Little China. We are going to be watching Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country for next week. Travis talked about Unhinged. I talked about Rebecca, Battlestar Galactica, and Travis finished us off with Seduced by Nexium and Queen's Gambit on Netflix. Thank you so much. Again, like last week, we had that recommendation for watching The Beast. Anyone who has any recommendations for movies, TV shows, books, anything at all, let us know, because we'll happily consume it and give our thoughts and feedback, because, you know, that's what we do, and, you know, obviously people listen to us. But we will see you next week, ladies and gentlemen.
Good night.
Good night.